The emergency room buzzed with controlled chaos as Dr. Sarah Martinez worked on her third trauma case of the night. Her steady hands moved with practiced precision, suturing a deep laceration on a construction worker's arm. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across her face, highlighting the exhaustion that had become her constant companion since joining the civilian hospital 6 months ago. Sarah had traded her military fatigues for scrubs, but the transition from battlefield medicine to civilian healthcare felt like learning to breathe underwater. Every beeping monitor, every urgent call over the intercom, every rush of adrenaline reminded her of places she'd rather forget. The antiseptic smell of the hospital couldn't mask the phantom scent of desert sand and gunpowder that seemed permanently etched in her memory. "Dr. Martinez, we have an incoming trauma," called out Nurse Jennifer from across the emergency department. "Multiple gunshot wounds, ETA 5 minutes. Sarah nodded, already moving toward the trauma bay. Her military training kicked in automatically. Assess, prioritize, save lives. It was the same whether in a field hospital in Afghanistan or a Level 1 trauma center in downtown Chicago. As she prepared the trauma bay, checking equipment and calling for blood, Sarah's mind briefly wandered to her former life. She had been one of the few female Navy SEAL medics, earning respect through sheer determination and skill. Her call sign had been Angel, a name earned not through gentleness, but through her ability to pull wounded warriors back from death's door in the most impossible circumstances. The ambulance sirens grew louder, cutting through her memories. Sarah pulled on fresh gloves, her game face sliding into place. Whatever was coming through those doors, she was ready. She had seen worse, done more with less, and saved lives when others had given up hope. This was just another day at the office, another chance to use the skills that had once made her legendary among special operations forces. The automatic doors burst open, and the paramedics rushed in with their patient. Sarah's professional calm never wavered as she began her initial assessment, calling out orders to her team. Blood pressure, oxygen saturation, neurological response. The familiar rhythm of trauma medicine took over. She worked with the focused intensity that had once made her invaluable in combat zones, unaware that her past was about to collide with her present in the most unexpected way. The trauma bay filled with the controlled urgency of medical professionals fighting to save a life. Sarah's hands moved with surgical precision, her voice calm and authoritative as she directed the resuscitation effort. Outside the trauma bay, the rest of the emergency department continued its endless dance of healing and hope, unaware that within those walls, 2 warriors were about to discover a connection forged in the crucible of war. The patient on the table fought for life, while Sarah fought to save him, neither knowing that their paths had crossed before in a place where survival meant everything, and silence was sometimes the only armor that protected what remained of the soul. The night was far from over, and the real story was just beginning to unfold in ways that would change both their lives forever. The patient's vital signs stabilized after 2 hours of intensive work. Sarah stepped back from the trauma table, pulling off her bloodied gloves with the satisfied exhaustion that came from winning another battle against death. The man before her would live, though the road to recovery would be long and difficult. 3 gunshot wounds to the torso, significant blood loss, but his heart was strong and his will to live even stronger. "Good work, everyone," Sarah said to her team as they began the process of transferring the patient to surgery. It was then, as she was updating his chart, that she really looked at his face for the first time. The patient was sedated now, peaceful in a way that belied the violence that had brought him here. Something about his features nagged at her memory, like a song she couldn't quite place. Nurse Jennifer approached with the patient's personal effects: a wallet, some keys, and a small silver pendant that had been tucked beneath his shirt. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the pendant. It was a special operations insignia, worn smooth by years of handling. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened his wallet to check his identification. Marcus Rodriguez, age 34, former Navy SEAL. Sarah's world tilted on its axis as memories came flooding back with brutal clarity. She knew this man. She had saved his life before, in a dusty compound in Afghanistan 3 years ago. He had been the point man for a high-risk extraction mission that had gone sideways when they walked into an ambush. Sarah remembered everything now, the chaos of that night, the sound of automatic weapons fire echoing off concrete walls, and Marcus lying in a pool of his own blood with shrapnel embedded in his left shoulder and leg. She had worked on him for 40 minutes under enemy fire, her hands steady despite the bullets whining overhead. He had looked into her eyes as she worked, and she had promised him he would make it home. But there was more to that memory, something that made her hands shake as she held his identification. After she had stabilized Marcus and gotten him to the evacuation helicopter, she had stayed behind to help extract civilians from the compound. That decision had cost her everything. The building had collapsed under mortar fire, trapping her for 18 hours beneath tons of concrete and steel. When they finally pulled her from the rubble, Sarah's left leg was shattered, her back injured, and her career as a SEAL medic was over. The physical wounds had healed, but the emotional scars ran deeper. She had never seen Marcus again after that night, never knew if he had made a full recovery, never learned whether her sacrifice had been worth it. Now he was here unconscious on a hospital bed, having survived war only to be struck down by street violence in his own neighborhood. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had saved his life in Afghanistan, but she couldn't save herself from the crushing weight of everything that followed. The nightmares, the survivor's guilt, the constant question of whether she could have done things differently. Sarah realized she was staring when Jennifer gently touched her arm. "Dr. Martinez, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." The words were more accurate than Jennifer could have known. Marcus Rodriguez was indeed a ghost from her past, a reminder of the person she used to be and the price she had paid for her service. "I'm fine," Sarah lied, her voice carefully controlled. "Just tired. It's been a long night." She handed the wallet back to Jennifer and turned away, but she couldn't escape the weight of memory, or the questions that now demanded answers. What were the chances that Marcus Rodriguez would end up in her emergency room? Was it fate, coincidence, or something else entirely? 3 days passed before Marcus Rodriguez regained consciousness. Sarah had made excuses to check on him repeatedly, telling herself it was normal post-operative care while knowing the truth was far more complicated. She watched from the doorway as he slowly opened his eyes, adjusting to the harsh hospital lighting with the careful awareness of someone trained to assess threats even in moments of vulnerability. Marcus tried to sit up but winced as pain shot through his abdomen. His eyes swept the room methodically, windows, doors, medical equipment, the automatic threat assessment of a professional warrior. When his gaze finally settled on Sarah standing in the doorway, she saw the exact moment recognition dawned in his eyes. The surprise was quickly replaced by something else. Confusion, maybe even suspicion. "Angel," he said quietly, his voice rough from the ventilator tube that had been removed that morning. It had been her call sign, the name that followed her through 3 deployments and dozens of life-or-death situations. Hearing it now in this sterile hospital room felt like being transported back to a world she had tried so hard to leave behind. Sarah entered the room slowly, her professional demeanor intact, despite the emotional storm raging beneath the surface. "It's Dr. Martinez now," she said, checking his chart with hands that betrayed no tremor. "How are you feeling, Mr. Rodriguez? Any pain or discomfort?" Marcus studied her face intently, searching for something he couldn't quite name. "I remember you," he said finally. "Afghanistan. The compound extraction. You saved my life." His voice carried a weight of memory and something else, gratitude mixed with an emotion Sarah couldn't identify. "I was just doing my job," Sarah replied, the standard response she had given 1,000 times to avoid deeper conversations about her service. But Marcus wasn't buying the deflection. His training had taught him to read people, and he could see past her professional facade to the woman underneath. "No," Marcus said firmly, struggling to sit up straighter. "You stayed behind. The building came down and you were trapped for hours. The team told me later. They said you were hurt bad, that you couldn't deploy anymore." His eyes searched her face for confirmation of what he had learned months after the fact. Sarah's carefully constructed walls began to crack. She had spent years perfecting the art of compartmentalization, separating her past from her present, but Marcus's direct gaze stripped away her defenses. "The past is the past," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" Marcus asked. "Because I've been carrying it with me every day for 3 years. The guilt of knowing someone got hurt because they saved me. I tried to find you, to thank you properly, but the military said you had been discharged and they couldn't give me your information." The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of monitors and the distant sounds of hospital life. Sarah felt exposed, vulnerable in a way she hadn't experienced since those dark months of recovery and rehabilitation. She had built her new life carefully, becoming Dr. Martinez, the trauma surgeon, leaving Angel the SEAL medic buried in classified files and painful memories. "I need to check on other patients," Sarah said abruptly, turning toward the door, but Marcus's voice stopped her before she could escape. "Wait," he called out. "Please, I need to know, was it worth it? What you sacrificed for us that night?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications and unspoken truths. Sarah paused in the doorway without turning around. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I've been trying to figure that out for 3 years." Then she was gone, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and the growing certainty that their reunion was more than mere coincidence. Sarah found herself avoiding Marcus's room for the next 2 days, assigning other doctors to his case and burying herself in paperwork. But the hospital's head of surgery, Dr. Williams, had other plans. He cornered her in the break room on Friday afternoon with a knowing look that made her stomach clench. "Interesting case. That Rodriguez fellow," Dr. Williams said casually, pouring himself coffee from the machine that never seemed to brew anything stronger than brown water. "Former special forces just like you. Small world, isn't it?" Sarah kept her expression neutral, though her pulse quickened. She had never discussed her military background with her colleagues beyond the basic facts required for her employment. "I wasn't special forces," she corrected. "I was a Navy medic assigned to SEAL teams." "Right," Dr. Williams nodded. "Even more interesting. Mr. Rodriguez has been asking about you specifically. Says you two served together. He's refusing treatment from anyone else, claims he'll only let you examine him." The older doctor's eyes held a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Is there something I should know about Martinez?" Sarah felt trapped. Marcus was making her past impossible to ignore, forcing her to confront memories she had spent years trying to bury. "We knew each other briefly," she admitted. "I treated him for combat injuries once. It's not uncommon for patients to request specific doctors they trust." "Perhaps," Dr. Williams said, "but most patients don't research their doctor's military records and backgrounds. Mr. Rodriguez seems to know quite a bit about your service history. More than what's in your personnel file here." He paused, studying her reaction. "He also mentioned something about wanting to make amends for something. Care to elaborate?" The break room suddenly felt too small, too warm. Sarah could feel the walls of her carefully constructed new life beginning to crumble. "I'll take over his case," she said finally. Professional courtesy between veterans. But when Sarah entered Marcus's room that afternoon, she found him sitting up in bed with his laptop open, a determined expression on his face. Medical equipment surrounded him, but he looked more like a man on a mission than a patient recovering from multiple gunshot wounds. "I've been doing some research," Marcus said without preamble as soon as she walked in, "about what happened to you after Afghanistan. The medical discharge, the rehabilitation, the fact that you lost your military career because you stayed behind to help civilians." His voice carried a weight of guilt and something else, anger. "Perhaps at the unfairness of it all. Mr. Rodriguez, I'm here to check your wounds and assess your recovery," Sarah said professionally, reaching for his chart. "My personal history isn't relevant to your medical care." "It is to me," Marcus said firmly. "Do you know what I've been doing for the past 3 years? I've been working as a military contractor, making good money, living a comfortable life. And every single day I've wondered about the woman who gave up everything to save strangers she didn't even know." Sarah's hands stilled on the chart. Those civilians had families, children. "It was the right thing to do, was it?" Marcus challenged. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like the system failed you. You sacrificed your career, your health, probably your peace of mind, and what did you get in return? A medical discharge and a pat on the back?" The anger in his voice surprised Sarah. She had expected gratitude, maybe awkwardness, but not this fierce indignation on her behalf. "I'm fine," she said automatically. "I have a good job, a new life. I help people every day. But at what cost?" Marcus pressed. "Do you sleep at night? Do you have nightmares? Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you hadn't made that choice?" His questions hit too close to home, exposing truth Sarah had buried beneath layers of professional competence and forced optimism. "This conversation is inappropriate," Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. Marcus had touched on every doubt she had carried, every sleepless night spent wondering if her sacrifice had been worth it. "Maybe," Marcus agreed, "but it's also overdue. I owe you more than just my life, Angel. I owe you the truth about what your sacrifice meant and what I plan to do about it." Marcus's words hung in the air as Sarah struggled with emotion she had kept locked away for years. She sat down in the chair beside his bed, her professional facade finally cracking under the weight of his persistent questions and genuine concern. For the first time since she had walked away from her military career, someone was asking her about the cost of her choices. "You want to know the truth?" Sarah said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "The truth is that I wake up every night in a cold sweat, wondering if those civilians I saved are still alive, if they made it home to their families. The truth is that I see your face and the faces of everyone else I treated, every time I close my eyes." Marcus listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious with each word. This was the conversation he had been hoping for, the honesty he needed to understand the full scope of what had happened that night in Afghanistan. "I tell myself that what I do here matters," Sarah continued, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "That saving lives in this emergency room is just as important as what I did overseas. But sometimes I wonder if I'm just trying to fill a void that can never be filled, trying to prove to myself that my sacrifice meant something." "It did mean something," Marcus said firmly, "more than you know." He reached for his laptop and turned it toward her. "I want to show you something. After I got out of the hospital, I started a foundation. We provide medical care and support to Afghan civilians who were displaced by the war, especially families with children." Sarah looked at the screen, seeing photographs of medical clinics, children receiving vaccinations, and families accessing clean water for the first time. The foundation's name was displayed prominently at the top of the page, the Angel Foundation. "You named it after me," Sarah said, surprise evident in her voice. "I named it after what you represented," Marcus corrected. "The idea that sometimes the right choice is the hard choice, and that saving lives, any lives, is always worth the cost." He scrolled through more images, showing the scope of the foundation's work. "We've helped over 10,000 people in the past 2 years, built 3 clinics, trained local medical staff, provided clean water to 12 villages." Sarah stared at the screen, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was seeing. "This is incredible," she said softly. "But why are you showing me this?" "Because I want you to understand that your choice that night didn't just save those civilians in the compound. It inspired something bigger. Every person we've helped, every life we've saved, can be traced back to your decision to stay behind." Marcus's voice carried conviction and a deep respect that made Sarah's throat tighten with emotion. "I still lost everything," Sarah said, though her voice lacked the bitterness it had carried moments before. "Did you?" Marcus asked. "Or did you trade one kind of service for another? Look around this hospital, Sarah. How many lives have you saved since you've been here? How many families have you kept together? How many second chances have you given people?" Sarah thought about the countless patients she had treated, the emergencies she had managed, the critical decisions she had made that meant the difference between life and death. She had been so focused on what she had lost that she had never fully appreciated what she had gained. "There's something else," Marcus said, his expression growing more serious. "The foundation needs a medical director, someone with combat experience who understands both military medicine and civilian healthcare, someone who can help us expand our programs and train more medical personnel." Sarah looked up from the laptop screen, meeting his eyes. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a chance to see the full impact of your sacrifice," Marcus said. "A chance to take what you learned that night in Afghanistan and use it to help thousands more people. The pay is good, the work is meaningful, and you'd be working with a team that understands exactly what you've been through." The offer hung between them like a bridge, spanning the gap between Sarah's past and her future. For the first time in 3 years, she felt a spark of the passion that had once driven her to become a medic, the sense of purpose that had made every risk worth taking. "I need time to think about it," Sarah said finally. "Of course," Marcus nodded. "But Sarah, don't let the past define your future. You're not just a wounded warrior trying to forget what happened. You're Angel, the woman who saved lives when it mattered most. The world needs more people like you." Sarah spent the weekend walking through the city, thinking about Marcus's offer and everything it represented. She found herself in Lincoln Park, sitting on a bench overlooking the lake, watching families enjoy the warm autumn afternoon. Children ran along the shoreline while their parents watched, with the careful attention of people who understood how precious and fragile happiness could be. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Williams, asking if she was all right. She had called in sick on Monday, something she had never done in her 6 months at the hospital. The truth was that she wasn't sick in the traditional sense, but she was experiencing something she hadn't felt in years. Hope mixed with terror at the possibility of change. That evening, Sarah found herself back at the hospital, not for work but to visit Marcus before his discharge the next morning. His recovery had been remarkable, aided by the physical conditioning that years of military training had provided. When she entered his room, she found him packing the few personal items he had accumulated during his stay. "I wasn't sure you'd come back," Marcus said, looking up from his duffel bag. His movements were still careful, protecting his healing wounds, but there was strength in his voice that hadn't been there a week ago. "I needed time to think," Sarah said, settling into the familiar chair beside his bed. "About what you said, about the foundation, about everything." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I've been running from my past for 3 years, telling myself that if I could just become someone new, the pain would go away." Marcus nodded, understanding written across his features. "Did it work?" "No," Sarah admitted with a rueful smile. "It just made me really good at compartmentalizing trauma and pretending everything was fine. But seeing what you've built, knowing that something good came from that terrible night, it changes things." "How so?" Sarah looked out the window at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. "I spent so long focusing on what I lost that I never considered what I gained. The experience of losing everything and finding the strength to rebuild. The understanding of what it means to sacrifice for something larger than yourself. The knowledge that healing comes in many forms. And," Marcus prompted gently, "and I think I've been hiding my light under a bushel, as my grandmother used to say. I've been so afraid of being hurt again that I've been playing it safe, using only a fraction of what I'm capable of." Sarah turned back to face him, and Marcus could see a spark in her eyes that reminded him of the fierce medic who had saved his life under fire. "I want to accept your offer," Sarah said firmly, "but I have conditions." Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him since his arrival. "I'd be disappointed if you didn't. What are your conditions?" "First, I want to visit the sites in Afghanistan before I commit fully. I need to see the people we helped, to understand the impact firsthand. Second, I want to maintain some connection to emergency medicine here in the States, maybe consulting work or training programs for military medics transitioning to civilian healthcare." "Done and done," Marcus said without hesitation. "What else?" "I want to expand the program to include mental health services. PTSD, depression, survivor's guilt. These are wounds that don't show up on X-rays but can be just as deadly as any physical injury. If we're going to help people heal completely, we need to address the whole person." Marcus's expression grew serious as he considered the implications of what she was suggesting. "That's a big undertaking. Mental health services are complex, especially in areas where there's cultural stigma around psychological treatment." "Everything worthwhile is complex," Sarah said, echoing something she had once told a young medic during her first deployment. "But if we're going to call ourselves healers, we need to heal more than just bodies. We need to heal spirits, minds, communities." "You know what this means, don't you?" Marcus asked. "If you take this job, if you help build this program into something bigger, you'll become a public face for veteran transition and trauma recovery. No more hiding, no more pretending to be just another doctor." Sarah felt a flutter of anxiety at the thought, but it was overshadowed by something stronger: excitement. For the first time in 3 years, she felt like she was moving towards something instead of running away from it. "Maybe it's time to stop hiding," she said. "Maybe it's time to let Angel out of retirement." Marcus extended his hand toward her, and after a moment's hesitation, Sarah shook it. The gesture was formal, professional, but it carried the weight of shared history and mutual respect. They were no longer just a wounded veteran and the medic who had saved his life. They were partners in a mission that would honor their past while building something meaningful for the future. "Welcome to the Angel Foundation, Dr. Martinez," Marcus said solemnly. "Thank you," Sarah replied. "And Marcus? Call me Angel." 6 months later, Sarah stood in the courtyard of a newly constructed medical clinic in Kabul, watching as local children played around a well that provided clean water to their entire village. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty ground, and the sound of laughter filled the air, a sound that had been rare in this region for far too long. Dr. Amara Nazir, the clinic's lead physician and a brilliant Afghan woman who had trained in London before returning to help her homeland, approached with a medical report in her hands. "The vaccination program is ahead of schedule," she said in accented English, her smile bright despite the exhaustion that came from working 18-hour days. "We've reached 93% coverage in the surrounding villages," Sarah nodded, feeling a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with professional achievement and everything to do with purpose fulfilled. "The mental health program?" "Growing every week," Dr. Nazir replied. "Word is spreading that people can talk about their experiences without judgment, that healing the mind is as important as healing the body. Your idea to train local counselors in trauma therapy has made all the difference." The sound of a helicopter approaching made both women look up. Marcus was returning from a supply run to the provincial capital, bringing medical equipment and news from the outside world. His recovery had been complete, and his dedication to the Foundation's mission had grown stronger with each passing month. As the helicopter touched down, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The nightmares still came sometimes, but they were balanced now by dreams of possibility and purpose. She had discovered that healing wasn't about forgetting the past, but about transforming it into something meaningful for the future. Marcus jogged over to them, his face bright with excitement. "You're not going to believe this," he called out over the noise of the rotor blades winding down. "CNN wants to do a feature story on the Foundation. They want to interview you about the transition from military medic to humanitarian doctor." Sarah felt the familiar flutter of anxiety at the thought of public attention, but it was manageable now. She had learned to channel her nervous energy into productive action, rather than letting it paralyze her. "When?" "Next week, if you're willing. They want to film here, show the real impact of the work we're doing." Marcus's expression grew more serious. "Sarah, this could change everything. The visibility could help us secure funding for 10 more clinics, maybe 20. Dr. Nazir looked between them with curiosity. She knew some of their history, but not all of it. What she did know was that these two Americans had brought hope to places where hope had been a luxury few could afford. "There's something else," Marcus continued, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. "This came through diplomatic channels. It's from the families of the civilians you saved that night in the compound. They wanted to thank you personally." Sarah took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were photographs. Wedding pictures, graduation ceremonies, family gatherings. Each photo showed people living full lives, growing up, falling in love, achieving dreams. At the bottom of the stack was a letter written in careful English by a young woman who had been 12 years old the night Sarah's unit had extracted her family from the compound. "My name is Layla Rahman," the letter began. "You probably don't remember me, but you saved my life 3 years ago. I wanted you to know that I am now studying medicine at university in Pakistan. I want to become a doctor like you, to help people who are hurt and scared. My mother says you are an angel who came when we needed you most. I hope someday I can be an angel for someone else." Sarah wiped away tears as she finished reading, aware that Marcus and Dr. Nazir were watching her with gentle concern. "This girl," she said softly, holding up the letter. "She wants to be a doctor because of what happened that night." "The circle completes itself," Dr. Nazir observed wisely. "Healing creates more healing. Hope inspires more hope. This is how the world changes, one person at a time, one choice at a time." As the sun began to set over the Afghan mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Sarah felt a peace she hadn't experienced since before that fateful night 3 years ago. She had finally found the answer to Marcus's question about whether her sacrifice had been worth it. The answer wasn't in the lives she had saved or lost, but in the ripple effect of healing that continued to spread outward from every act of courage and compassion. The wounded had found their voices, the silent had found their stories, and the healers had found their home. In this place where war had once reigned, hope was building something beautiful and lasting. Sarah Martinez, known to her friends as Angel, had finally come home to herself. The room had indeed fallen still when the SEAL medic learned who she had been in battle, but the silence hadn't been empty. It had been full of possibility, heavy with the weight of destiny and ripe with the promise of healing yet to come.